Hunger does not arrive with a loud explosion. It comes on a very ordinary morning, when you open the kitchen cabinet and realize you no longer have choices. Just a storm lasting longer than expected. A power outage lasting longer than usual. A moment when store shelves empty faster than you can prepare. And within just a few quiet days, life can drift away from its familiar path. The most frightening thing is not the complete lack of food, but the moment the feeling of safety disappears before you understand what is happening. At that point, the issue is no longer whether the food tastes good or bad, but whether you still have enough strength to keep going or not. This video is not about stockpiling a lot. It is about 20 simple foods that have quietly kept people standing through the hardest periods of history. Things that are inexpensive, easily overlooked, yet are the ones that remain in the end when everything else disappears. And perhaps the most important question is not how much you have prepared, but rather, if everything slows down tomorrow, what is still in your home to continue living in a normal way? A crisis does not come when you run out of money. It comes when there is nothing left to buy. And at that moment, the kitchen cabinet decides whether you remain normal or not. 1. Canned vegetables no longer fresh, but still vegetables. And sometimes, just having vegetables in a meal is enough for the body to feel cared for. In ordinary days, fresh vegetables are so natural that we rarely notice them. But when going outside becomes difficult, when the refrigerator slowly empties, or when a power outage makes everything spoil faster than expected, the presence of a small can of vegetables on the kitchen shelf carries a very different meaning. The metallic sound of a lid opening in a quiet kitchen, a simple green color appearing in the middle of a poor meal. Sometimes details that small are enough to say that everything is not completely out of control. Canned vegetables do not only provide fiber, vitamins, or minerals so the body does not weaken. More importantly, they preserve a sense of balance, that a meal is still a meal, life is still life, and it has not fully fallen into survival mode. Because when there are still vegetables in the meal, it means you are not only trying to survive, but still living in a decent way. And sometimes, that quiet decency is what keeps people standing the longest in days when the world becomes more unpredictable than ever. In your home, which item would run out first if you did not go grocery shopping for 7 days? 2. Canned fruit. A small touch of sweetness can lift the spirit more than we think. On exhausting days, what saves you is not only calories, but the lingering sense of comfort after a long day. There are moments when the body is not truly hungry, but the mind is exhausted. Everything moves slowly and heavily, and a meal that is merely filling is still not enough to make you feel better. At that moment, a few pieces of soft fruit, slightly sweet, slightly familiar, become something very different. Not loud, not special, but enough to remind you that life still holds gentle moments. The sound of a spoon touching the side of the can in a quiet kitchen, a mild fragrance spreading very slowly, and sometimes that alone is enough to make a long day a little less harsh. Canned fruit is not a luxury, it is a small piece of comfort. The thing that keeps the spirit from slipping when circumstances begin to grow difficult. When there is still a little sweetness left in the home, it means hope has not gone too far away. 3. Canned tomatoes. The base of many familiar meals, and also the thing that turns dry, rigid ingredients into a real meal, rather than just something to get through the day. When only rice, noodles, or a few simple items remain on the shelf, it is the gentle sourness and warm red color of tomatoes that give the food back the shape of care, making the kitchen no longer feel empty as if waiting for something worse to happen. With just a small pot, a little boiling water, and a few spoonfuls of tomatoes. A familiar aroma can spread very slowly, enough to remind that life is still continuing in its most ordinary way. Canned tomatoes not only provide the necessary nutrition so the body does not weaken, but also preserve the structure of a meal with a clear beginning and end, with liquid, color, flavor, and a sense of warmth. And sometimes, on days when everything seems to revolve only around survival, seeing a pot of red sauce gently simmering on the stove becomes a very thin boundary between merely enduring and still having enough calm to keep living. Because when the kitchen still holds the smell of hot tomatoes, it often means that life, no matter how difficult, has not surrendered. 4. Instant mashed potatoes. Fast, hot, soft. Exactly the kind of food the body needs most when it is too exhausted to think about anything else. There are days when a person does not need a complicated meal and no longer has the strength to cook for long, and what they search for is simply the feeling of warmth slowly but steadily spreading into the stomach. Like a very small signal that the body is still being cared for, and this evening can still pass in peace. When boiling water is poured into the potato flakes and gentle steam rises in the quiet kitchen, the rhythm of life seems to slow down long enough for you to take one more deep breath, long enough for the tightness inside to begin to soften. Instant mashed potatoes are not a memorable dish, yet they always appear at the moment when people are weakest. They do not try to impress, only quietly complete the simplest task. Return a little energy to the body, soften the fatigue in the spirit, and help a long day close more gently than expected. Because when you can still eat something soft and hot in your own kitchen, it usually means that life, no matter how harsh, has not gone beyond the limit you can endure. And sometimes, that very small moment of peace appears exactly when a person is closer to collapsing than they want to admit, so that with just a little simple warmth, they can continue moving through tomorrow. 5. Honey it does not spoil. It only crystallizes over time, like many things in life that seem to have changed, but are actually just waiting for a little warmth to return to their original form. A jar of honey resting quietly on the shelf does not draw attention, is not as urgent as water or a hot meal, yet it carries a very different kind of reassurance. The feeling that something still remains durable enough to accompany people through long periods of instability without diminishing. When placing the jar in warm water and watching the crystals slowly dissolve, one can easily realize that gentleness sometimes does not disappear. It only temporarily solidifies to protect itself from time. Honey is not only sweetness. It is a very soft reminder that there are things in life that do not need to be hurriedly replaced, do not require fear when they change, because their true nature still remains inside. And sometimes, what people truly need in long, exhausting days is not more strength, but simply a small sign that sweetness has not yet left them, no matter how much the outside world changes. How many days are you storing enough for? 3, 7, or 36? Sugar. A fast source of energy when the body is running out of strength. There are moments when a person does not need a full meal, but only something simple enough to pull them out of the faint dizziness, quietly spreading through each breath. A small spoon of sugar dissolved in warm water is not a long-term solution, but sometimes it becomes the necessary pause for the body to regain balance, like a short rest on a road that is too long. On ordinary days, that sweetness may be seen as unnecessary, but when strength drops low, it becomes very practical, helping the mind become clear again, helping the hands and feet shake less, and helping a person stay alert enough to make the next decision. Sugar does not carry the endurance of honey or the warmth of a hot meal. It is simple, quick, almost primitive. Yet that very simplicity makes it important in moments when the body moves close to a limit no one notices. And sometimes, the ability to keep going for a few more hours does not come from something grand, but begins with a very small sweetness, enough to remind you that you still have the energy to move through the rest of the day. By this point, everything may sound ordinary, but there is a kind of deficiency that causes people to lose strength the fastest without understanding why. Not because of hunger, but because the body begins to lose balance from the inside. And you only realize it when you stand up and feel dizzy. 7. Salt. Without salt, the body cannot retain water, and also cannot remain standing for long. This is not something people usually think about when preparing food, because salt is too small, too familiar, almost considered something that is always available. Yet that very familiarity makes it one of the most dangerous deficiencies when everything begins to be disrupted. When the body loses water and minerals, fatigue does not arrive loudly but very slowly. A slight dizziness, weakening steps, difficulty concentrating. And sometimes, the boundary between still standing and having to sit down is separated only by a very small amount of salt. Salt does not create a feeling of fullness, nor does it bring warmth like a hot meal. It performs a much quieter task, keeping the body balanced enough to endure a little longer. In ordinary days, people easily forget that role, but when everything becomes harsh, those tiny grains of salt become the silent foundation that keeps a person from collapsing too soon. And sometimes, what keeps you standing through a long day is not any great strength at all, but the very fragile balance the body still manages to hold inside. 8. Cooking oil. The most concentrated source of energy in the kitchen cabinet, and also the thing that quietly determines how long the body can endure when full meals gradually become rare. It does not take much. Only a small amount of oil carries more energy than most of what remains on the shelf, helping the body maintain warmth and keeping hunger from becoming too severe. In ordinary days, oil is just a familiar cooking ingredient that almost no one notices. But when surrounding conditions are no longer comfortable, its true role quietly appears, keeping the body from getting cold too quickly, keeping strength from dropping suddenly, and extending a precious amount of time for a person to manage. Cooking oil does not bring comfort like sweetness, nor does it create a clear feeling of fullness like starch. It performs a much quieter task, sustaining life in a slow but persistent way. And sometimes, the ability to move through a harsh day does not come from having a lot of food, but simply from the body still having enough energy to keep itself warm. In moments like that, the simple item resting in the corner of the kitchen becomes a silent reserve that keeps a person from fading too soon before dawn returns. 9. Flour. The ability to make bread means the ability to take one more step towards self-reliance when the outside system is no longer stable. A bag of flour may look like nothing more than a raw, dry ingredient, simple enough to be overlooked among things that can be eaten immediately. Yet that very simplicity carries a deeper meaning. It is not only food, but the ability to create food. As long as there is flour, water, and a little heat, a person can still feed themselves through the next day, without needing stores to stay open, without supply chains running smoothly, and without any perfect conditions at all. Flour does not bring instant reassurance. It requires time, patience, and a very quiet belief that the effort invested still has value. But the moment of kneading dough in silence, waiting for it to rise slowly, then watching a loaf gradually form in the warmth, reminds a person of the most fundamental truth. When you can still create your own meal, you are not yet completely dependent on the outside world. And sometimes, that small sense of self-reliance does not only help you live through another day, it also preserves the feeling that this life still belongs to you. 10. Baking soda. A very small item, often resting quietly in the corner of the kitchen, yet carrying the ability to do far more than its simple appearance suggests. Just a little baking soda can help with cooking, cleaning, deodorizing, and even keeping the living space feeling orderly when familiar things gradually become scarce. In ordinary days, that versatility is almost unnoticed. But when surrounding conditions begin to change, the things that can do many tasks at once become the most important part of quiet preparation. Baking soda does not nourish the body like food, but it helps protect something greater. The feeling that life is still being held in minimal order. When the kitchen can still remain clean, when unpleasant smells can still be removed, when a simple meal can still be completed fully, people find it easier to stay calm before outside disruptions. And sometimes, the true value of a small object does not lie in its size or price, but in how many times it helps you avoid the feeling of helplessness. Because in a crisis, what is most valuable is not what is grand, but what is versatile enough to keep life from collapsing too quickly. If you could choose only 5 items from this list, which 5 would you choose? 11th, bouillon cubes. Just a small block dissolving in hot water. Almost not enough to be called a meal. But when the steam begins to rise slowly and a very familiar aroma spreads gently through the kitchen, the surrounding space seems to soften in a way that is hard to explain. There are days when a person does not truly need to eat much. They only need a small sign that the place where they stand is still warm, still possible to rest in, not yet turned into a cold, temporary shelter. The quiet sound of boiling water, a hot cup in the hand, and that simple soup aroma sometimes do what bigger things cannot: make the house feel like a home again. Bouillon cubes do not carry much nutrition, nor do they solve the difficulties outside the door. But they preserve something very fragile that people easily lose when life becomes unstable. A sense of safety small enough that no one notices, yet real enough to slow the heart. And sometimes, as long as the kitchen still gives off a familiar fragrance, that alone is enough to know you still have a place to return to, and that today is not yet the day everything collapses. 12. Shelf-stable milk. A familiar item that makes unusual days feel a little less strange. Without needing refrigeration or special conditions, a small carton of milk still rests quietly on the shelf, as if nothing outside has ever changed. In moments when daily life is disrupted, people often lack not only food, but the feeling of normalcy. The sense that morning can still begin with a simple glass of milk, just like many years before. That familiarity is what keeps the mind from drifting too far away from balance. Shelf-stable milk does not carry an obvious survival meaning like water or long-term stored food, but it preserves something more delicate: the rhythm of everyday life. When a child can still drink milk before sleep, when an adult can still prepare a warm glass in a quiet morning, the house still holds the shape of living rather than just a shelter through disruption. And sometimes, what helps people move through difficult days is not grand preparation, but a few familiar habits that still remain, enough to remind them that peace has not completely disappeared. From this point forward is the group of foods meant for days when the system shuts down abruptly. Power outages, stoves not working, refrigerators becoming nothing more than dark boxes. Many people store plenty of dry goods, yet lose strength at this stage. Because there are days when what saves you is not the ability to cook, but the ability to eat immediately. 13. Canned fish. Eat immediately during a power outage. No cooking required, no long preparation needed. Just open the lid and energy can return directly to the body. In situations where the stove no longer works, the refrigerator is only a dark box, and everything familiar is suddenly interrupted. Simple foods like this reveal their true value. Canned fish is small, compact, almost unnoticed on the shelf, yet it carries what the body needs most when weakening: protein to maintain strength, healthy fats to sustain energy, and a clearer sense of fullness than quick snacks. Unlike foods that only support the spirit, canned fish acts directly on physical strength. Just a small portion can ease the fatigue quietly spreading, helping the mind become more alert and the body regain the ability to keep functioning. In ordinary days, it is only a convenient meal, but when conditions become harsh, that convenience turns into something very real. Small enough to store for a long time, yet valuable enough to keep a person from collapsing too soon before everything has a chance to brighten again. If the power were out for 72 hours, what would you eat that requires no cooking? 14. Canned chicken, not the most delicious. It does not carry the aroma of a freshly cooked meal, nor does it bring the comfort of familiar everyday dishes. But in a crisis, the value of food no longer lies in how appealing it is, but in whether it is enough to keep a person standing. A simple can of chicken, opened in the silence of a powerless kitchen, may not bring joy, but it carries something far more important: the certainty that the body is still being nourished. Crisis always changes the way people see what once seemed obvious. When choices narrow, the idea of delicious gradually becomes a luxury, while the idea of enough becomes the foundation of peace. Canned chicken does not try to become a perfect meal. It only does the one thing that matters most: helping you move through another day without collapsing. And sometimes, the boundary between despair and hope is not decided by anything grand, but rests in a very simple truth. When there is still something to eat, tomorrow still has a chance to begin again. 15. Peanut butter energy dense, no cooking required. Just open the lid, and a small spoonful can bring the sense of solidity the body is searching for when strength begins to fade. In ordinary days, it is only a quick food, sometimes even considered too simple. But when time, electricity, or the ability to cook is no longer the same as before, that very simplicity becomes valuable. Peanut butter needs no preparation, no waiting, and no perfect conditions. It quietly provides enough energy for you to continue through the rest of the day. Unlike foods that bring immediate warmth, peanut butter works more slowly, more steadily, like a reserve of strength held behind rather than bursting forward. It does not make a long day easy, but it helps that long day still be completed. And sometimes, what keeps a person from collapsing is not a large meal, but a small and stable source of energy that is still there. Enough to remind you that you still have the strength to continue, even if only for one more day. 16. Powdered milk, calcium, protein, and the familiar feeling of a glass of milk in days when nothing else feels familiar. When many parts of life change too quickly, simply watching the white powder slowly dissolve in warm water is enough to bring back an old rhythm of normalcy. The rhythm of quiet mornings, of silent care that people once considered ordinary. Powdered milk not only adds nutrition to a tired body, but also carries a gentle memory. The feeling of being nourished, being protected, being reminded that you are still worth caring for even when circumstances become harsh. Unlike foods that only help endure hunger, powdered milk touches a deeper layer of life, where the need is not only to survive, but to be healthy enough to continue living with dignity toward yourself and others. A warm glass of milk may be very small amid great upheaval, yet sometimes that small thing keeps the heart from becoming dry and hardened. And when a simple glass of milk can still be prepared in the home, it often means that care has not yet left, and hope has not either. 17. White rice. The simplest thing, yet also the thing that has kept millions of families standing through the hardest periods of history. Not elaborate, not expensive, not carrying any special appearance. Rice quietly exists in small kitchens, repeating through identical meals until people easily forget its true value. But when other choices gradually disappear, when food becomes scarce and everything once familiar is no longer certain, that very simplicity becomes a point of support. A pot of hot rice not only eases hunger, but also brings a sense of stability. The feeling that life has not completely slipped away from its familiar path. White rice promises nothing grand. It simply endures there day after day, enough to sustain the body and allow a family to still sit together. And sometimes, true strength does not lie in rare or special things, but in the simple thing that remains when everything else has gone. Because when there is still rice in the home to cook into a proper meal, it often means that hope has not yet run out, and tomorrow still has a reason to begin again. History has never collapsed because of a lack of luxury. It collapses when the simplest things are no longer there. 18. Dried beans protein that is durable, inexpensive, and quietly reliable. Not bringing the instant convenience of ready-to-eat foods, dried beans require soaking time, cooking time, and patience. Things that seem small, but become deeply meaningful when life forces people to slow down. That slowness creates a different kind of strength. Strength that comes from the body being nourished long enough to avoid exhaustion, steady enough to continue facing long days with no clear end. Beans are not glamorous, but they are loyal. They do not make circumstances easy, but they help a person keep enough strength to move through those circumstances. And in the hardest periods, the endurance of the body often comes before the endurance of the spirit. When the body is still nourished, the spirit rarely collapses completely. Therefore, the true value of small beans lies not only in the nutrition they provide, but in the time they give people to remain standing, long enough to wait for something better to return. 19. Oats soft, easy to digest, and especially important for bodies that are no longer as strong as before. As age increases, human needs gradually change, no longer eating as much as possible, but eating lightly enough for the body to still receive it, gentle enough not to create additional burden for a stomach that has passed through many years. A bowl of hot oats in a quiet morning may not bring the long-lasting fullness of large meals, but it offers something more delicate: gentleness. It allows the body to begin a new day without having to struggle from the very first moments. Oats are not loud, nor do they create a strong impression. Yet that very softness becomes precious when health is no longer abundant. In the most fragile stages of life, what keeps people standing is often not great strength, but things gentle enough not to cause further harm. And sometimes, a simple meal can become a very quiet reminder that this body is still being cared for, and that life still has a reason to continue for one more day. When a family can still cook hot noodles, they have not yet fallen into true despair. 20. Pasta. A simple hot meal, yet enough to remind that life is still continuing. Not elaborate, not special. Pasta is only something that can be cooked quickly in a small pot with a little water and a little time. But that very simplicity carries a deeper meaning in difficult days. When you can still cook a hot meal, the kitchen has not yet become a cold place, and the rhythm of life has not completely stopped. Steam rising from the pot of pasta, a light aroma spreading through the room, All are very small signals that normalcy has not disappeared. Pasta does not solve the large problems outside the door, but it preserves the most fundamental thing inside the home: the ability to continue living day by day in a simple way. And sometimes, hope does not arrive through grand changes, but simply through the fact that the evening still holds a hot meal waiting for you. When that small thing still exists, it often means the journey is not yet over, and tomorrow still has a chance to begin again, one more time. In a true crisis, the first thing to disappear is not food, but the feeling of safety. These 20 foods are not meant to prepare for the end of the world. They simply help life avoid collapsing too quickly when everything around begins to waver. A true crisis does not arrive with a loud explosion, but with small disruptions until normalcy disappears. Preparation is not fear. It is a quiet way to protect the peace of your family. When others panic searching for each meal, you only need to open the kitchen cabinet and continue living as if it were a normal day. And in uncertainty, normalcy is the greatest advantage. If this video made you think even a little, share it with someone you truly care about. Sometimes, preparation begins very small, yet arrives at exactly the right moment.